because we want everybody to be able to hear what is said. So before I introduce our moderator for the next session, this session has actually 4 parts. We're going to start with a 1-hour talk show style panel on the power of financial literacy. Then we're going to have 3 lightning talks or Pecha-Kucha style presentations on 3 examples from the field. Then we're going to have 1 PowerPoint presentation by our colleague David Schreier. And last but not least, I will make all important announcements for the rest of the day, because we are not coming together anymore in plenary. We're going to meet in the networking cocktail receptions in front of this room at the end. So if you want to know where there's food, if you want to know what's on the menu for breakouts and how the marketplace works, please stay in the room until the end of the session. I now have the pleasure to introduce you to our moderator for this session. She's actually the former Chief of Finance Sector Group at the ADB, so many of you who hear the second or third time know her. She was responsible for the second Asia Finance Forum. Now she is actually the Regional Director for the Pacific, based in Sydney. And previously to that, she was also working for the Ministry of Finance in many important positions in Sweden. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to our moderator, Lotte Strunz-Well.
Thank you. This will briefly introduce myself and the team on the scene, because I have a big podium here so people can't see me. It's really a great pleasure to be here today, and I think we have a really exciting session ahead of us. And this session is focused on financial inclusion. And as we move into a more digital environment or online environment, I think financial inclusion is going to be increasingly important. Not just financial inclusion, but financial literacy. So financial literacy is important, but also digital literacy and financial capabilities. And I think we're going to be talking about financial capabilities and how that can also help transform how people access finance. And so far we've spent billions of dollars on financial literacy training, and it's going to make huge impacts. We've made a lot of progress. But still, there are millions of people who are still financially illiterate and financially excluded. So with this great panel we have today, we're going to learn how we can use financial literacy to turn financial access into actual usage. And I'm not going to spend time reading the bios of our colleagues because you can read it online in our app. I want to get into our discussion as soon as possible. And we have I'm going to expect lots of questions from you all on the floor. And please vote for the questions. And we can ask really tough questions to these panelists as well. We have lots of great examples to show you from the field. So we have Peter Morgan, we have Rick, Aksha, and Hella. So please give them a warm welcome. So I'm going to start off with Peter, because this is really a forum for how technology can reach or bridge the access to finance gap. So can fintech and financial literacy combine to promote financial inclusion?
Thanks, Lynn. I'm delighted to be here. Yes, I think there's some very interesting evidence that there is potentially a synergistic effect between fintech and financial literacy. We've done work in a couple of areas on that. First, in Laos, we did the OECD financial literacy survey, but we also included questions about fintech knowledge and fintech use. And we did find that there was a positive correlation between financial literacy and use of fintech services, so that suggests that although financial literacy has a direct impact on positive financial behaviors like savings and using more financially inclusive products, that if this can also encourage use of fintech, then that could have a sort of a multiplier effect on the or a combined impact of financial literacy and fintech on financial inclusion. And similarly, we just did some work on a big survey of financial literacy by the Bank of Japan, had like 25,000 respondents. We also found a significant positive correlation between financial literacy and the use of fintech payment services. So I think, again, that increasing financial literacy could have a payoff in terms of a greater use of fintech. Now, the one interesting result we found, which was slightly contrary, was that there was actually a negative correlation between financial literacy and the holding of crypto assets. So you can make of that what you will.
Thank you. That was actually quite interesting, the last correlation there. So let me turn to Hannah, because there's one interesting development that we see. So it is with financial capabilities. So how can financial capabilities complement the traditional financial literacy? And how are you defining or distinguishing financial literacy with financial capabilities?
Thank you, Lottie, for your question, and it's great to be back to ADB. Just to kind of differentiate between these two key terms. Till now, we've been talking about financial literacy. So presumably, it is basically a transfer of knowledge, skills and information, and a person can then, with the objective, can become financial literate. And financial capability, basically, it integrates behavioral dimensions. So it's about not only taking the knowledge, skills, information, but it is aimed with the objective of changing the attitudes and behavior or actions that kind of lead to good financial decisions. So what you cannot, so in financial literacy, basically, the differentiator between financial literacy and capability is that in financial literacy, you do not know whether it will lead to changes in behavior. While when we're talking about capability, and that is the definition of CFI, that it leads to changes in behavior, and clients are more informed and they are able to take a more rational financial decision. So that affects the decision-making ability. So that's the basic fundamental difference. I think both these initiatives complement each other. Financial literacy, typically, that we've seen is that which is being promoted till now is more in a classroom environment where you have modules, and that's being delivered outside of the process that kind of takes place. In financial capability, what you do is that you kind of impart knowledge and skills to a client as they kind of do the transactions. So that is the big change that you see in literacy versus the capability. So it's a part of the process of the delivery of a financial product.
So just to follow up, how do you actually go about changing people's behavior?
There are different ways in which you can kind of go about changing people's behaviors. And this is something I just want to kind of highlight, that the Center of Financial Inclusion, where I come from, and has kind of, we've assessed over like 100 innovations, and we've identified that there are like 7 behaviorally informed practices that really show a great, those are the kind of rules, the 7 principles, or what we say, if they are applied, then that they can change the behavior of a client. The first, what we call, is the teachable moments. In this, what happens is that it's important to reach consumers when they are taking financial decisions, or they are, for example, utilizing a financial service. That's like when they are signing up on a contract. So you need to teach them when they're doing that. So that's teachable moments. The second one is about learning by doing. So in order to drive the financial capability, you need to provide opportunities to clients to use technology. You can have stimulations. There are a lot of examples. There's Fundacon in Colombia, which helps women get familiar with ATMs. I'm sure that's happening in Philippines and other countries as well. The third principle what we have is on nudges, and so basically it's talking about all of us tend to forget, and behavioral economists, they really suggest that there needs to be timely reminders, whether by SMS or in person, because ultimately we want the clients to stick to their goals. And there's an example from Green Bank, actually from Philippines itself. They use the nudges to improve the saving behavior of the clients. And the impact is that it increased the savings by almost 82% in a year. So that kind of nudges really changes things. I just will take one more minute. The rule of thumb on fourth is using heuristics. So heuristics are nothing but just mental shortcuts that we need to make to apply to make learning really easy in life situations. Like maybe one of the examples could be asking one of your clients who are entrepreneurs to kind of separate, to keep two separate drawers, like one for putting in their business money or their household cash flows separately. So that's just a rule of thumb that you can ask them to do. So it's easier for them to know, what are their profits at the end of the day. So again, just always there's the fifth talks about it's always fun, to make it fun. If you are able to introduce some game, you are having an app and you are introducing some game and making it fun, people learn faster. So if you're able to apply that principle, it works better and behaviors change. It's also advisable to customize it, because ultimately, that's the difference. If you want a customer to be financially capable, then you need to be able to customize your inputs. Like if you're talking to women, then you might have a chat bot with the women talking, in a slang which can communicate better to the women. If you're talking to a youth, you might want a young, some young person communicating with the youth. So it's about tailoring, customizing, and then of course it's always, we've known through microfinance and other approaches that if you make anything social, it really works. So these are some of the principles that you apply, and if you're able to apply all of that, you can make customers more financially capable.
Thank you. I think that was a great summary. I'd like to ask that you have to make it more fun. That resonates very well with me. So I'll turn to Akshat. So with Microsafe, you have had vast experience in financial literacy. And just building on Hannah, how do you think we should rethink how we deliver financial literacy?
First of all, thank you for having me here. I'll also like to touch upon the problems which we have with the traditional approaches, right? Because we've been hearing this term financial literacy, financial education for many years, more than a decade now. The core issue is that there is a gap in which what the regulator or the service provider thinks the financial literacy or education should be, and what the end customer ability is to comprehend what is being given to them, right? So the gap is in terms of the content, the delivery method, and on to what this entire program is aiming at, to change their knowledge and skills or to change their behavior, right? So now that we know the problem, there is a clear evidence which is out there in front of us. In the morning we saw that if we create better access to the customers, there would be a huge jump in the economy. We saw what the Asian economy would look like. But even when we have seen that there has been a huge improvement in terms of creating access, the usage is still subpar, right? We have 690 million mobile money wallets which have been issued, and only 24% of them are active. Same goes for the bank account, same goes for any other instrument which is being issued. The challenge is not regarding the person's capability to use, the customer's intent to use. So some of the approaches which we have taken at MicroSave have been targeting very basic problems which we have found in the customers. So what we are doing is we have been using a KSAP framework which focuses on knowledge, skills, ability and practice. The idea is that when we follow this framework, we have to make the person a regular user by the end of the road. And some of the programs wherein we've been working with customers who are numerate, who understand numbers, but they don't know what these numbers actually mean. They are oral, they believe in word of mouth, in social proofing, as Hema said, right? So what we have been doing is just to add to Hema's principles which she listed, so it's always good if we can make the entire experience easier to comprehend for the end customer. Intuitive, based on their mental models, how they manage their finances, right? It has to be relatable to them. And there has to be a concept of human touch. So when we talk about social proofing, when we talk about opinion leaders, it's always good to include a human touch in the delivery of these trainings. And believe me, financial education is not a training. It's an ongoing dynamic activity which has to be done at various stages. When any service provider is trying to sell a product and make the customer use it. Right? And just to touch upon the behavioral nudges, it's always good to design the products as per the needs and aspirations of the customer, but it's also important to understand why the customer is going to use it and how do you do it. So that's some of the areas we have been working on.
Great, thank you. Someone raised asked it, and Visa has an enormous amount of work to promote financial inclusion and financial literacy. And you've done a lot of work in the Philippines as well, so maybe you can share with us a little bit about what you did here, and also some of the challenges, because we learned a lot from challenges and also how we overcome those challenges and then your successes.
So financial literacy is actually a really core part of our corporate social responsibility at Visa. So in Philippines itself, actually we started this journey a little bit later. So we started our first financial literacy program 2 years ago. And it was actually a multi-pronged partnership because Visa as a company, we're pretty lean. So we have to really rely on partners and the power of partnerships. So what we did was we partnered with BSP, Tanghalang Filipino, which is a theater production company, as well as Teach for the Philippines that reaches out to the teacher network. So it's a very interesting concept because as what Hema shared earlier, I think for financial literacy itself, most people think that, it should just be like taught from textbooks, right? But you have to really teach it in a very interesting approach and be a little bit more creative about it. And secondly, I think it has to be really relevant to the local community. So in the Philippines itself, we decided, I think theaters, arts is a pretty popular pastime amongst Filipinos itself. So we decided why not incorporate financial literacy concepts into a theater program. So we actually partnered with a local theater company and we got them to start customizing the copyright and the screenplay from scratch, and it's also produced in Tagalog, because we decided that's also more relevant to the local community itself. So when we started on this program itself, we weren't really sure how that would work, but we wanted to just give it a shot. So we did a pilot, and we kind of partnered with local schools in Metro Manila, and we showcased the play itself. And it was really successful, so we decided to extend it into a Christmas season because it was in December, and then we showed to the public as well, where parents themselves could have the opportunity to come see the play, because a lot of the concepts are actually really relevant because it's down to, for example, needs and wants, and that's something that, it's part of the basics of financial literacy. Secondly, we decided, we had to incorporate and enable the program to really scale, because we believe that, financial literacy program shouldn't just be a one-off effort. It should be sustainable, and it should have the capability to scale as well so that it will be successful. So in our second year itself, we decided we wanted to bring the play and expand it beyond Metro Manila, and given the whole rise in technology where people are so reliant on their mobile devices and digital devices, we decided to make the play into a soft copy format that could be shared through a USB. And when we did that, we actually partnered with Teach for Philippines because they themselves would then educate the teachers. Because one problem that we found in the Philippines was that teachers themselves didn't have the financial literacy knowledge. And if they don't have the financial literacy knowledge, how would then they be able to teach the students, right? So we worked with Teach for Philippines, and we did like sort of a training within the Teach for Philippines network of teachers, and then they would then, be deployed into different areas in the Philippines so that we ensure it's not just within Metro Manila, but it's in every single part of the Philippines itself. And then from there, they would do like a train the trainers program. So they would then teach the teachers in their own schools. And what they did was they learned about the financial literacy production. We produced a teacher's manual where they could showcase the screenplay in the classrooms as part of life skills or financial literacy curriculum. And then they would then go through step-by-step questions on how they should be guiding the entire classroom curriculum sessions with the students and engaging them. So we did that two-prong approach with teachers as well as with students, and we found that really successful. And so in the last 2 years, we've kind of scaled the program to about 25,000 students and teachers across the Philippines. So I think in terms of challenges, I think I mentioned earlier, I think first is the sustainability of it. So that's something that we continue to work on. And the second thing is, I think, in terms of measuring the impact, because I think financial literacy is not something that you could just do a pre and post survey and you know that that's like a behavioral change. So that's something that we find it very difficult to measure. And for sustainable programs, it's good to have that measurability so that we can measure whether it's really successful or not. So when we worked with our partners, I think that was the challenge that we faced, and we said that, in order for us to really measure the impact, we have to also give it time. So that's something that I think companies that are doing corporate social responsibilities have to be aware that it's not going to be like a 1 year, 2 year program, and then you just cut off your resource at that point of time, because then you won't be able to really see the end impact at the end of the day. So I would say that those are some of the things that we've done.
I'm going to go back to Peter, because in the last session we also talked about standards. So, and you've done a little bit of work on this as well. So what is digital financial literacy, and what do you see as standards that need to be developed for this?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think the concept of digital financial literacy is somewhat of the intersection between financial literacy and digital literacy, but it also goes beyond it somewhat. It's just begun to be talked about. The OECD has a recent document on it, but even that is just kind of suggesting the questions and directions. So we actually wrote a policy brief for the Think 20 process, which is part of the it's one of the so-called engagement groups for the G20, where we talked about an actual definition of digital financial literacy, and it had broadly 4 parts. So the first part is just the knowledge of the various products and services. So, and you would divide that into 4 categories. So payments. Secondly would be alternative sources of finance, such as P2P lending or crowdfunding. Third would be asset management, such as robo-advisors, that kind of thing. And then the fourth would be sort of others, like microinsurance, for example. The second main aspect would be the knowledge of the risks of those products. So, for example, the possibilities of things like phishing or farming or spyware, or what happens to your digital footprint. How can you protect your? What are the risks to your data being exposed? And then the third aspect would be, what are the ways to control those risks? So that how do you manage your passwords? How do you detect bogus email messages or pages which might lead you to divulge your personal information? And the fourth aspect would be, what are the avenues for redress? What happens if you do get if your account gets hacked or something like that? Where can you go get redress. So I think all those dimensions are quite important.
Great, thank you. I see we're getting some questions here from the floor, and I encourage you please to ask, post your questions and start voting as well. So we'll take the first question here. One is, and I'll leave it up to Brad, who wants to answer it probably. The first one is, what do you think are the steps in breaking the social barrier and stigma between unbanked and financially literate people? Anyone want to give this one a go? Any takers up here?
Well, I think maybe the most basic step is education in general. That we found that there's quite a good correlation between one's general level of education and one's financial literacy level. So that if you can improve the access, both not only to the quantity of education, but also the quality of education, that will have a big potential impact on reducing that gap.
I'll just add one other thing, that the stigma relates to the perception of